part 2 of the lesson on Wilhelm Wundt. Remember, we learned that he is the first person to call himself a psychologist. He wants to make psychology experimental, like a science that you can prove things. So let's look at what his theory was about psychology. One, he focused on what we call consciousness. And remember, consciousness is like our awareness of things, like that where, you ever hear someone sleeping? Well, they're unconscious, they're not aware. Consciousness is awareness. Okay, so just start with that. And he wants to break it down into the smallest possible pieces. And he really focuses on our five senses. And so he hopes to break down our consciousness using our five senses, our sight, smell, taste, hear, things like that, and create a periodic table of elements, for psychology. Periodic table of elements. So look up at the right-hand corner, you'll see like the periodic table of elements for chemistry. That's like all, the different elements, and they have whatever, so many, a number that you get based on how many electrons or whatever they have. I don't even know, because this chemistry, I can't remember. It's been a long time since I took chemistry. But the point is that he wants to do this for psychology. And he wants to break it all down and create like this very provable aspect of consciousness through experimentation. He calls his branch of psychology structuralism. Oh, I'll come to that in a second. So like, this is what it looks like. So general sense. So he would do all these experiments on different things, and he had like general senses like pressure. And then people would have to, you would have intensity and duration of these things. And then you would have to say like whether you thought it was pleasant, unpleasant, excitement or depression, tension or relaxation. And then he would go to heat and give you different things of heat. Did you find it pleasant or unpleasant? Like, it's kind of odd, really. Sound, like simple sounds, simple tones, smell, taste, sour, sweet, bitter, salty. And he would go through, and this is what he did tests on. This is what his big experiments were on, where like whether or not you found sweetness pleasant, unpleasant, exciting, depressing, tension, relaxation. Like, what did it do to you? So, he's kind of hitting on a little bit of psychology when he talks about like depression and relaxation or tension or pleasantness or happiness or whatever. But in general, like, it's a little bit of an odd way to get at, why humans psychologically have depression or whatever. All right, so the branch of psychology, I kind of jumped on that. Now I'll get to it. It's called structuralism. Structuralism, because he wants to create a structure of the consciousness, of our awareness of the world. Structuralism. That's really important. You got to keep track of that, because each of these early psychologists will have like a type of psychology that they're known for. By the way, no one practices structuralism today. So like, some of the things that we're going to talk about, like, they're actually still practiced, but this, no, it's not practiced anymore. Like, no one is out there in psychology anyway studying like how pleasant you find something to a sour thing taste. They're not worried about that. So he wants to break it down into smaller parts, and this just shows you kind of what I was showing you earlier. General sense, pressure, heat, cold, sound, smell, taste, light, like bright lights, darkness, blah, 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 blah. That's what his goal is. And in what he said he used introspection, what we call introspection, in order to study this. He wants you to think about, he wants you to be introspective about your, how you find something pleasant or not pleasant or depressing or whatever. And that is kind of getting at psychology. So that kind of gets into psychology. Let's just look at the word introspection. You might make some arrows off of introspection, and a circle intro, and then above it put inner, and then specter, which is the second part of the word spection, I should say. Go ahead and put look. So it's like looking inside yourself. And what introspection means is you being self-analytical and soul-searching. And good psychologists do get us to be introspective, for us to look inside and really analyze, why are we doing what we're doing? Because that's really an important thing in psychology to think of. Aristotle says knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Like, if you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, then you start to have a little bit more compassion for other people, and maybe start to maybe change your behavior. But if you're just out there flipping going nuts on people all the time, and or letting people use you all the time and never analyzing why you do that, then it's a little hard to change. So like the idea of introspection is a beginning psychology idea that Wilhelm Wundt is bringing forth. So he used introspection to study consciousness and senses. So he's asking the people doing these what are really kind of silly experiments in pressure and sound and taste. He wants them to be introspective. So at least he wants them to do something that's valuable in psychology. The problem is he's having a focus on like taste. Does that chocolate make you excited or does it bring depression? Of course, the answer there is it makes you excited because it's freaking chocolate, especially if it's white chocolate Reese's peanut butter cups. Just FYI, they're my favorite if you're wondering like what to get me at Christmas. Just saying. Or like teacher appreciation week or something. White chocolate Reese's peanut butter cups. Yes. All right. Sorry. Okay, I'll continue. Criticism. So look in the upper right-hand corner before we get on to that. There's a very famous psychologist of the 20th century, B.F. Skinner. We'll talk more about him later. B.F. Skinner criticized structuralism for not being scientific. He says like, so he's trying, so like the irony is that Wundt's trying to make psychology scientific, but the reality is that it's not scientific because as B.F. Skinner says, it's not observable behavior. Like you saying, like me saying, I love white chocolate Reese's peanut butter cups and it brings me just pleasure and I feel excitement rather than depression. Or me watching you eat white chocolate Reese's peanut butter cups and not share them with me brings me depression. Like it's not observable. So that's not really science. Science is something you observe, you can experiment, you can replicate it. And so B.F. Skinner's like, yeah, he's like trying to do these experiments and like literally his experiments are not even scientific. Like it doesn't work. Like this isn't really science. So the criticism is pretty obvious here. He established, so one is that it's one thing that's good. Sorry, let me start with that. He established psychology as an empirical science, the idea that you should try to test things and actually see how true it is. Like that is true. He did that. That's good. And you do it based on experiments. So this is a positive thing that Wundt had. He also had the idea of introspection was good. So he did a couple good things. The problem is the next part, which really gets at what B.F. Skinner's saying, is that his findings had almost no impact on mental illness and treatment. Like, what good did it do to find out whether putting pressure on someone's hand or leg or foot or whatever and they found it pleasurable or unpleasurable? Like, what good did that do in terms of someone's mental illness or depression? It did none. And so his experiments in the end were thought to be very impractical. Like, it was just, okay, that's great, but like, what does that do? So that's the problem with Wilhelm Wundt. All right, read over the notes that we have for Wilhelm Wundt a couple times, and then do the practice. Make sure you look at the words that we have, some vocab words like empirical or introspection as well. All right, great. Take the quiz on him.